For what appears to be the first time in Canadian history, a polyamorous all-male throuple, 3 homosexual men living in a sexual relationship, have successfully adopted a little girl. And the clip about this story, presented as a very heartwarming story, went viral on X. Here is that story.
For the last 7 years, Jonathan Bédard, Eric Leblanc, and Justin Maheu have been waiting to become parents together. Something that officially happened yesterday.
She's perfect, of course. She's curious, she's energetic, she loves to play, she loves to jump, she loves to dance.
They adopted their 3-year-old through Quebec's Youth Protection Services, but first had to be approved as foster parents, something that required a lot of work and openness, they say, to their relationship.
Notice in this clip that the journalist just assumes that this is a good thing, refers to all 3 men as her parents, which is not the case, I don't think legally and otherwise, and no comment whatsoever on the fact that this little girl is being essentially inserted into a predominantly sexual relationship by 3 people and that she will have no mother, or more accurately put, she has a mother, but she has now been placed with 3 men.
We had a lot of things to go through in order to be able to have that accreditation, and it's through that process that they learned that we are a little different because we're 3, but we're not different from any other family.
That's the line that they're trying to emphasize here. We're not different than any other family. No sane culture, no sane journalist would ever make that kind of statement, that 3 homosexual men in a polyamorous relationship are no different than any other family. And her comment at the beginning of this media report, that they have waited a long time to become a family, again, just asserts that children are commodities that can be bought or sold or acquired, because obviously 3 men cannot have children biologically.
Some other Canadian provinces, including Ontario and British Columbia, legally recognize more than 2 parents. Quebec does not. Last April, a Quebec Superior Court judge ruled the government has a year to modify the civil code to allow a child to have more than 2 recognized parents, saying the current situation is unconstitutional and violates the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms since it discriminates against different family models. Quebec is appealing the decision. The Justice Ministry declined our request for an interview, saying they won't comment since the matter is in court.
We think that either way it might go all the way to the Supreme Court, but we're saddened from the fact that we're not backed by our own government, which is supposed to be an open government that wants to help every single family.
While the law doesn't recognize all 3 as parents, they say they're sharing the responsibilities equally.
Notice that they buried the lead. She refers to those 3 men as of adopting this little girl, even though legally speaking, they did not manage to adopt this little girl as a throuple. But the media and the journalist is affirming the premises of these 3 men who are claiming to all be her parents, even though this is obviously not true biologically, but it's not even true legally. Those 3 men are not legally all the parents of this little girl, even if you accept the, again, unproven assertion of the journalist that this is just another family structure.
And doing whatever they can to create a stable home and secure future for their daughter.
We talk about what come up if we split up or if someone dies and stuff like that. We do anticipate those things because we have to, because we're not protected if it doesn't.
And after what it has taken to get here, they're enjoying this moment.
We are lucky to be 3 to give her all that support, but I think we're the lucky ones to have her in our life.
Denise Roberts, CTV News.
So that clip has, for understandable reasons, gone viral on X. And if you watched that clip and you thought, this is perfectly normal, what's wrong with that? You should ask yourself how swiftly things have shifted. Again, this is 3 men who are not the parents of this little girl, who have successfully acquired this little girl, and the media is asserting that all 3 are her fathers. All 3 are her fathers, despite the fact that this is not only biologically untrue, but it's also legally untrue. The media is pushing for this new family arrangement and asserting that it's true even before the courts have affirmed that all 3 can be legally considered parents. It's so insane that we're even having this conversation, but some of you might remember there was an earlier episode of the Bridgehead briefing where we covered what I would say is the prelude to this story. So back in April, a Quebec Superior court judge ruled that multi-parent families, like throuples, 3 people basically living in a loosely defined sexual relationship, should be granted the same rights in, the words of the court, any other unit. By unit, the judge was basically referring to what we once referred to as the natural family, a father, a mother, and their children. Now, it's important to emphasize this because so much of the commentary online is like, how did this happen? And the reality is, social conservatives predicted. They predicted loudly and they predicted persistently that if the natural family was legally redefined by same-sex marriage, it would open the door to legal recognition of an ever-expanding number of sexual relationships. That is just the fact. You can say that you're okay with that, but the reality was that once we said the gender or the sex of the couple didn't matter, then why would the number matter? There was no limiting principle. There was no reason that if it can be 2 men and 2 women, that now it can be 3 men or 3 women and 1 man, or any number of other arrangement, any other unit, as the judge would put it. And so once the law was unhitched from the reality of the natural family, all the limiting principles were gone. And I'm still old enough to remember this. Social conservatives were mocked as bigots at the time. I was a teenager when this debate was happening. But now everything they predicted is actually happening. So as the judge put it, limiting the legal affiliation of children to 1 or 2 parents is unconstitutional. And that's frankly insane because limiting the legal affiliation of children to 1 or 2 parents, which is to say their actual parents, is a protective measure. It is an assertion that in most cases, the biological mother and father have the greatest care for the child, want to protect the child the most. And so when you remove all of those limiting principles, all of those boundaries, and I'm talking about in the main now, not in exceptional circumstances where a child is not safe with her biological mother or father, or the biological mother or father are incapable for some reason of actually taking care of them. But all of this is just swept outside the door. And as that clip mentioned, the judge basically ruled that Quebec has a year to modify the civil code to permit children to have more than 2 legally recognized parents, and Quebec is appealing this. And we said again earlier on the show, and it's such an important point to make, that again, social conservatives also warned when the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms was enshrined that it circumvented parliamentary supremacy, meaning that judges could read whatever their worldview was into the Charter of Rights and Freedoms and claim that any restriction on virtually anything now formally constitutes a violation of that charter. And here we see this happening. If you had a social conservative MP, like Jason Kenney was, for example, at the time, standing up in the House of Commons and saying, you know what, if we redefine marriage this way, we're going to end up having all male throuples adopting 3-year-old girls. He would have been yelled down, he would have been screamed at, he would have been called a bigot, because similar arguments were made, and that actually happened. And yet, here we are. And so just months after this decision, the inevitable consequence of that decision has arrived. And it's really important to emphasize here that there's so much Orwellian language in this clip, right? You know, I mentioned while I was playing the clip, Eric LeBlanc saying, through that process, the agency, learned that we are a little different because we're 3, but we're not different than any other family. This is a lie so brazen, only the mainstream media could have reported on it with a straight face. It's not just that we're 3, which is incidentally a very relevant fact. 3 polyamorous men living together do not qualify as 3 fathers for a little girl. They're also different because there's no mother. This is a little girl growing up with 3 men and no mother. That's a pretty significant thing. A motherless little girl is something that we used to recognize as a tragedy. And again, there are instances in which that tragedy is unavoidable, but it's a tragedy nonetheless, rather than a chosen social arrangement as is taking place here. Now, the adoption is significant for a bunch of reasons, because the throuple clearly wants to present the court with basically a fait accompli, because how can the judicial recognition of their relationship be overturned when they've already successfully adopted? By basically adopting this little girl, claiming that all 3 of them are the fathers, when that's not even legally true, and having the media cover their story as if all 3 are the parents, they're going to accuse the court of attempting to tear apart their family now if the appeal, the appeal from Quebec succeeds and the judge is overturned in his ruling that children can have more than 2 legally recognized parents. And so I suspect that they're going to basically now, without irony, state that it's necessary for the good of this 3-year-old little girl that they have obtained with a Superior Court judge's decision to recognize multi-parent units, basically, that this be upheld for her good. That is the case that they're going to make. We can already see this happening, and LeBlanc is kind of anticipating it in that clip where he says this is going to go all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they're already saddened that the government isn't recognizing their family, their polyamorous relationship into which they have inserted a 3-year-old little girl. And CTV, again, goes so far in ensuring that their position is presented as the only reasonable one. Because CTV even states that they're sharing the responsibility of raising their daughter equally and making provisions to ensure she is protected and provided for in the future. I want to emphasize this one more time because we're going to be seeing more stories like this. There is no limiting principle now to what judges can do with the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and with the sort of moral collapse of Canada, we're going to be seeing more and more sexual arrangements pushing for recognition. And then inevitably, when they want to kind of put together a family with all of these different pieces, they're going to be demanding that they have the right to children that, of course, that cannot be biologically produced in a relationship between 3 men. The very same mainstream media that damned those who warned about these scenarios as bigots are now kind of presenting this as a heartwarming fairy tale with a happy ending. And so in 2 decades, we've basically gone from that will never happen homophobes to look at the wonderful story of 3 gay men who have successfully adopted a biologically unrelated 3-year-old. Their family is just like any other. Meanwhile, the LGBT movement has such a vice grip on Canada's establishment that not a single federal politician or mainstream commentator has bothered to protest or point out that this is wrong. Take a look at the mainstream media coverage. Try to find a federal politician pointing out that a little girl being adopted into a 3-way polyamorous relationship of men is something that Canada should not be tolerating. And you won't find it. And so what we're seeing here is what Rod Dreher refers to as the law of merited impossibility. That can't happen, and when it does, we'll be happy about it. Thank you all for listening. We hope you found the commentary helpful, and if you did, please do like the video, drop a comment in the comment section to engage in the conversation. We're always interested in hearing your thoughts. And of course, if you found it helpful, please do share the video on whatever platforms that you are on. You can also find this show wherever else you download your podcast content. Thanks again so much for watching.